Welcome to another edition of Egberto Off The Record. Today, I am honored to be with a friend and a colleague who started out where I was, KPFT 90.1 FM Houston, one of our
That's right.
best journalists, best
Thank you.
videographers, best producers. He wore all those hats. Hello, Chris Sampson of The Wiretap. How you doing, buddy?
Dobry Vecher from Kyiv, and it's great to see Houston. I never forget my good wearing my colors. I got to represent my Astros here in the capital and in Ukraine. And there's nothing like being with a homie from KPFT, my
Well, man, I
hometown.
can I can tell you that, as we say, Chris Sampson, he's coming in from Kiev, Ukraine. You're in Kiev today, right?
I've been here for 4 years, in fact.
But you've been all
Tomorrow,
over.
tomorrow is the 4-year mark since Russia launched its full-scale invasion. I've been here through all of it.
Yeah, and in fact, there are times that you and I have been online on the line when the missiles
That's
and
right.
drones were going over your apartment complex.
That's right. I don't
But
let it phase me. I let it fuel me.
well, it didn't
Get my
phase you, but it
focus.
phased me. And
I'm sure it
I'm
does.
I'm
I'm
thousands
sure
of
it does.
miles away. And while those things are going on, I'm like, hey, Chris, aren't you scared, man?
But look, we both have at least one problem. The difference is why. But your electrical system goes down because of a corrupt governor. Ours goes down because the drones and missiles hit the power facilities. So,
Yeah, but the one thing I can say, Chris, about the Ukrainians is that's a resourceful bunch.
amen. Amen. Let me take that if you don't mind. I think one of the things that's so important in my learning here about Ukrainians and the personal experience I had is there were some things that didn't translate very well across the news sphere all of our lives. I'm 56, I'll be 57 this year, and so I grew up in the Cold War, but Ukraine was always buried under Russia
Hmm.
labels of any kind, right? So USSR pretty much always meant Russia. And one of the things that has been an eye opener, in fact, a soldier here, a hero of Ukraine, who is self-described as he says, I'm right wing, but very right wing. I go, okay, loves Malcolm X, you know, speaks in language that I grew up with at KPFT about revolution, about what it takes to deal with basically the slave state, because Ukrainians were held in slavery under Russian
Yeah,
imperialism, and during the USSR were subdued in terms that I don't, just like I don't use the N word, I don't use the K word here, which is a very similar word, always thrown at guys in the military. Friends of mine that are my age who served in the military says, I would be in my job and I'd be called this name all the time, and it was this kind of crap, and the more I've seen it and the more I've gone into the way in which Russians stole the poetry, repurposed it into Russian poetry, stole the names of different people, and then washed out the goodness of what they were really saying about, the people who had been oppressed. They would take like Taras Shevchenko, one of the great poets, and you could still see Taras Shevchenko statues, but only so much as it was the worker class part of it,
hmm,
not the part that was Ukrainian. And in KPFT land, I was very adamant about focusing on communities that were marginalized, and especially like I kind of had a reputation there of not whitewashing my world music program. It created some conflict with some people who wanted like what I call Putumayo world music stuff. And I said, no, 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 I'm not going to do that. I don't believe in that. I still don't believe in that. And I live it by action here. And I've learned so much. I speak the language well enough to get my job done. I work with people who've been both in captivity, in occupation, and the stories that get told to me personally, some of which I have to distill them because they're very traumatic, even to the listener. They show that there's something in the Russian way of, especially during captivity or occupation, that is the playbook I fought against under Dick Cheney, the torture programs that
hmm.
Mitchell and Jessen applied to the captured supposed terrorists. And some of them were terrorists, but some of them you didn't know. And that playbook that they used was directly out of the Russian and Chinese and Khmer Rouge playbook, So there's been a lot to learn. And, I definitely want to get to questions you have instead of pontificating, but
Oh, no,
I
no.
always
I
I
think
always think of my audience at home, and And the value system I learned at KPFT, and I think about what is it I need to bring back to my home? Meaning, when I say home, I mean KPFT. What is it that I need to bring back to that community that taught me a value system or reinforced a value system that I have had my whole life?
Well, you know what's interesting? To let you know, we are doing this live
Yeah,
on a Substack right now, but on Thursday, this is likely to be played on KPFT,
yeah.
depending on how long we go, right? But because we are actually in Fund Drive on KPFT, so but we will be playing this even if I have
Oh
to
yeah.
do some
Okay,
cut.
okay. So
Yeah.
you gotta use. Hold on. You gotta use this part. Ready? KPFT, let me explain what I think is most important that I used to say when Scott Summers was my radio guru. Pay the rent with everyone else. Pay the part that is your community radio. If you don't have this community radio, if you don't pay your part into shows like this goes away. You can see what Jeff Bezos did to Washington Post. You can see what CNN does by washing people out. And we know that if you want this kind of programming, you've got to do your part. Even if it's just a little bit of contribution, become a member today.
Wow, you know what? I am going to cut this piece right out and put it in for Thursday when I'm actually going to, put that into the program.
I
Thank
got
you
it
for that,
down. I
Chris.
never
Hey,
forgot.
for those who are just getting here, both of us practice at the same uh, public radio station in Houston, Texas.
Mhm.
Now we have Chris Sampson, who is with the Wiretap. He's out on his own in Kyiv, Ukraine, covering
That's
the
right.
entire war. And he has put himself into. Sometimes we speak over over what do we speak over?
Booms in air defense.
No. I'm talking about.
Oh.
My mind is fried when we are speaking over that tool. WhatsApp. My God, what's wrong with
Ah,
me?
yeah, WhatsApp. Right.
We'll be speaking
The
over
other
WhatsApp
tool.
and missiles are going over this guy's head, and it's like, damn, aren't you scared? But anyway, we work together at KPFT
Yeah.
at different times. You worked between '96 and '99 and 2000.
So I was a guest as a musician in the early 90s. And then by 96 or 7, I joined as a co-host with Scott Summers' Avant-Garde Music Show. And I was on every third Sunday night to talk about, first Indian classical music, which I'm trained in, and then other types. And then I wound up being handed Music Beyond Borders on a Sunday program at 6 p.m.
Yes.
It was later moved to 8 p.m. And then Otis McClay, my guru and our great
Oh yeah.
program director at the time, came to me and said, I'd like to talk to you about maybe changing Sunday night to all black programming. I said, that's fine. What can I do to help? And so we retooled that show and we were a little bit off the air, but I was still working with KPFT News, the fledgling KPFT News that was being launched with
Yeah.
Renee Feltz and Jackson Allers and all those great folks. And eventually we came back with Music Beyond Borders being a daily Monday through Friday show, 1 to 3 p.m. But by then I was producing all sorts of programs. I would
Yeah.
volunteer with Akua Holt to do, Black August, or I would do live casting around the
And
city.
Aqua is still there,
I
and
love Akua Holt. These are my
yes.
family members, by the way, but from far away. And I was the executive producer for Noticiero Spanish language news with Eddie, with Freddie Porras and those guys.
Hmm.
And then every part of the station consumed a big chunk of my life, and it taught me a lot of the tools that I use now. I totally learned at that station.
And I think that is the thing with most of us, right?
Mhm.
We go there, it's a station where you get to break the ice, you get to make mistakes, which is the thing.
Yeah.
You get a chance to make mistakes. But anyhow, look, over here in the United States, Chris, Ukraine has fallen off the map. Every now and then they'll mention it in case they're meeting or whatever.
Right.
What how do Ukrainians feel now about the United States? I don't want to get into the war yet. How do they feel about United States as an ally?
So I think here's the good news. I'm the one who's the cynic.
Mhm. Oh,
uh,
really?
uh, oh yeah. I'm like, yeah, did you read Terror of Markansis? Like I'm very angry about the Americans, about the Americans. And they go, no. Like we know Americans, the majority of Americans support us, and we know that the problem is the administration. That's great news. And one of the things that was very emotionally charging for me was the amount of love that would pour out by being an American. And there was the whole point of what happened 12 years ago here in the country was that this country wanted to move towards the Western Hemisphere
Right.
in what was good, including with value systems that I think have a lot to teach Americans. The value of standing up to autocracy, even at the cost of lives. 107 people were killed 12 years ago this last week,
With
and
Zelenkinko, right?
with Viktor Yanukovych.
Yanukovych, yeah,
And
yes.
yeah, and who, by the way, was empowered by the help of Paul Manafort, who wound up working with Trump, and who recently tried to approach Valery Zelensky, the former commander in chief and ambassador to UK, still playing the manipulation system. So what I've seen here that's really amazing is that, for instance, when a bill was passed last July to basically kind of create some barriers on the two corruption the corruption organizations. Those protesters hit the street and reversed that in 7 days. In
Wow.
7 days, went out and said, "Oh, really? Okay, let me tell you how that works out." And they went, "Oh, no, 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 no." And meetings were held within hours. The five more important heads of that all sat down and said, "Wait, okay, look, we're not trying to roll back the ability to do so. There's some concerns about infiltration." And actually, and I will say in very serious terms, Russian infiltration and collaborative infiltration by people who have not the best interest of the people has been a problem. And therefore, I understand that what hits the news may be too nuanced for the short, 5-minute blurbs. But it was reversed in 7 days. And I actually, I was in Mykolaiv that night, was surrounded by Ukrainian journalists. I was the only non-Ukrainian journalist at the table. And the stress kicked in, and they were having this back and forth. I said, "But can I chime in on something?" "Yeah, I think it's going to be okay." "Yeah." "Why?" "Because I have faith in you guys." And I meant the people. I have no political hero worship type peoples. I'm not wired that way, never have been. And I was right. I mean, I'm glad I was right, because I'm okay if I'm wrong, but it was such good news that within less than 2 hours, we have a meeting. And then the next day we had a meeting. And within 7 days, it's okay. We're going back where we were. Everyone's cool. And I said, that's what I mean. That they listen to the people. That, in fact, when I had someone, a shop owner who doesn't like Zelensky, he goes, "Yeah, but isn't he a bit of a dictator?" And I said, "Isn't it hard to get things through the RADA and policy paralysis from populism?" Uh, well, yeah, that's the exact opposite of dictatorship. Like,
Exactly right.
if the problem is that we're trying to get everyone happy, that's the exact opposite. Because dictatorship, and I came across this when December 2023, when Putin gave his big 4-hour speech and Zelensky gave a speech behind, because there were people in the audience riddling with Zelensky with questions that were a little bit irritating about the kind of local politics, and he, kind of rolled his eyes a little bit, but he answered him. And I said, "You know what? Autocracies are neat and democracies messy. But
Yes.
we want messy democracy in a sense that it's everyone getting their fingers in the pie, everyone getting their fingers in the cooking, and everyone getting it done. Autocracy does not work that way. Autocracy is neat. There's the state narrative, the state apparatus, the state press, and everyone knows what that is. And democracy is very messy. And when I see that happening, I'm like, okay, that's good news, even with all its problems.
Now, how do you feel when you look across the pond and see that that is where Trump is attempting to take America? But Minnesota, love you, Minnesota, they have really put a real thickens in his cock.
Notice that Trump just sent his, I'm going to remember we're on the air. He sent his,
Armada.
what do you say? What do you say? Marco Rubio. What do you say, Marco
Yes.
Rubio? So Marco Rubio goes to meet at the Munich Security Conference. And who are the first two people he goes to meet immediately after that? Victor Orban
Orban,
and,
yes.
Robert Fico. And Hungary is in the lowest EU category for corruption and declining. And Robert Fico has Gazprom corruption issues, and they're declining. And that's who they run to. These autocrats, these like Viktor Orban, straight up autocrat. And their autocratic appeal is really galling when they're trying to pitch this like very backwards Christianity to, the Tucker Carlson crowd, and they believe that these guys are like, they're bringing it back. But what they're really doing is reversing the progress of the modern civilization, if you will.
Now, are the people in Ukraine noticing this switch to the right with Donald Trump? Or are they still oblivious to that?
Definitely not oblivious. Oh, no, no, definitely not oblivious. There was a little bit of a hope, I think, in some people who were frustrated with some things in the last administration about support that they didn't necessarily relate to, that 51% of Republicans were voting against support, 100% of Democrats were voting in favor of support. But it turns into stagnation at the White House level. And Biden's administration did not, at least at a public appearance level, go out and do like the mass appeal for how to
Right.
get the support done. So it was confusing, and the frustration kicked in to where a few people, and I would even talk to them, even some administration level or ministry level, they would say, well, maybe now that Trump's in office, things will get better. I'm like, no, no, no. Oh, wow. And they would see that look on my face in the public meeting, and I was like, "Men is what the Christopher is, and that's and I would basically kick into my Ukrainian and go, Why do we call him um, a businessman? He's not a businessman. He's a con man. He lies. He's a 34-time convicted criminal, 6 bankruptcies. He goes to meet Kim Jong Un, walks away with nothing. He disempowers the Afghan government to the Taliban with the Doha Accords. I mean, and I just laid into with the record because I basically have a PhD in Trump and Russia. And so when I got done, the older guy was still kind of a little. I don't think he liked how direct I was, but the people closer to their 30s and 40s who were very mindful about
They
what they're
knew.
about to inherit, they pulled me aside and go, "Man, you had that down." I said, "Well, I have a PhD in Trump and Russia, so
Right.
I know how Trump sees the world as big boats, little boats, and he is impressed with the big boat of Russia, even if it's a rusted, corrupt autocracy, brutalizing even its own people." And I can get into that if you want, but when I don't want to be the "I told you so" guy, but I had a lot of people who said, "You called it." And I said, "The problem is actually worse than I called it. It's there's still that little hope that at least there's some part that he'll want to win or he'll want to do something to help." He's worse than that. I mean, he literally, throws lives away here just for giggles.
That is a shame. Now I have, and I think I have some questions, and I like to do that, be sort of interactive with the people that are in the chat. And the first
Me
thing,
too. I love it. I love it.
yes,
We have him here. Yeah.
yeah, the first thing is Catherine Hill. She asked what time it is. You're 8 hours ahead of us. What time is it
It
there
is
now?
it is 8:19 right now in the
It is
evening.
8:19
And
East.
I'm in blackout, by the way. I have a full-blown blackout here in the area. We have had our power systems have been destroyed. I have watched my power facility be hit by missiles 8 specific times, including one recently that flamed for 30 minutes, like a
Oh,
glow, like the
really?
sun
The
was.
oil
Oh,
and
yeah.
the oil and the transformers.
They
Yeah.
just hit those. They hit those power facilities hard, and they hit them. Yeah, yeah.
Are
And
they
they're
trying
trying
to
to
kind of
basically
harden
freeze.
those facilities by putting them on the ground at all, or
There's no ability to do that retroactively. They're
okay?
above ground, and what Russia's trying to do is freeze everyone out.
Now that you said that you're in a blackout right now, in the section of Kiev that you are you guys with portable generators or what?
Well, in the big tower facilities where we all live, big residential buildings, there's no ability to do that because you have no, it's not safe. We've even had people who both froze to death. We've had elders who froze to death in their buildings. We've had elders that, or not just elders, but people who've had carbon monoxide poisoning. So it's not possible. But what we usually do, like in my case, we have small little power systems you can buy to put, like I have my Wi-Fi and my light panels running, and I have these little 10-watt light panels that do
Oh, so you have some
exactly what
very
they.
low power, high intensity
Yeah.
thing. And the one thing they do is they make sure to keep the cellular system up as much as they can.
For the most part, and in fact, after the first year, so in by 2023, I would say it was probably May or June. Um, I don't remember what part of the government process did this. Probably the Verkhovna Rada passed a demand that said, look, to the cell systems, it's so important to have communications. You need to require that you are able to power at least so many hours per day so people can communicate. And I don't know what the current rebuild grid on the cell system has been, but they actually not only work to repower them, but also to create mobility for that because of the ever growing way in which the system is attacked.
Now, are you coming to us via cell or through satellite?
Wi-Fi, Wi-Fi.
Wi-Fi. Okay, and where's the Wi-Fi? Who's running the Wi-Fi? Or
It's straight up cable system.
okay,
You know,
good,
just
good.
like what we would use, hardwired. Yeah,
Hardware. Okay, so that's why you're coming over clear and without too. I guess
yeah,
ultimately you're coming over the fiber under the ocean or something because
pretty much.
there's very little latency in our communication this time
Yeah,
around.
and I love
Yeah,
it. Right, very
yeah,
true.
I
Things
love it
we can stay
too.
in touch.
Okay, I have another question here.
Sure.
Is Zelensky in any political trouble right now where he could fall in the near term?
No, the more Donald Trump and the various, you know, crap talkers.
Hmm.
Um, See, I still got my FM wiring in my head. The way that they attack him causes even the critics to say, you don't get to decide who the sovereign leader of our country is. And there are definitely people who would love to replace him at some point into something, but they know that elections are not safe. We have too many people displaced. We have people in occupation. And more importantly, it's a Russian demand coming out of a Trump a mouth like Witkoff.
Hmm.
So when that happens, the more that happens, the more the country isn't going to be seeking to push that. But
Right.
are there internal dynamics that are at play? Always, absolutely always. And I actually think that's a good thing. It snapped me out of some naivety when I got here in the first year when I was filming a woman who was painting the iron barricades. They call them hedgehogs often. My friend Varvara. And I interviewed her, and I needed some music in the background. And I had some stock music, and I went, I don't really want that like Vivaldi's music and stuff. I said, I need something organic. So I went to a music instructor I knew and I said, hey, would you compose music for this? And I showed her the video. And at first she said yes. And she watched the video, and Barbara had complimented the president, Zelensky. And she went, I will do nothing with this. And she insulted her. Really. Oh, why? Well, because I can't stand that man. I believe in Valery Zaluzhny. Okay, and so I love this though. I love that there are people who have different reasons for standing for a different way because I think I would be a little worried if everyone was lockstep behind any particular person too much.
And it also shows it is democracy, right?
It
It's
is truly that way. And
yes.
I have heard so many opinions over 4 years. I love that I never went back and forth. There are people
Hmm.
who come to do wonderful aid work, and I really love and respect them.
Well, and
But
there are a lot of
that
people
keeps,
who are stars now who came over there and
yeah,
did their thing and went back home
yeah,
stars. I was over there. Before we
yeah.
move any further, folks, I want to give you a plug. I think it's an important plug. You just started recently here or recently using Substack again. You are now number 32 rising in news, which is beautiful. That's some of
I was at
the
18 followers in November or whatever when I finally did it
right,
back up.
and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to tell the audience that are listening. We have it's currently 88 people and growing. If you would
Yeah,
go ahead and subscribe to Sampson here. He's out there in Ukraine, and doing some good work, keeping us informed. I get my Ukraine information directly from the source, not ABC, CBS, and all these guys that have to filter their information, but from somebody who is living amongst the people, somebody who live amongst the Ukrainian journalists, somebody
right.
who is in the blackout right now as he is coming through cable to us with battery lit lights. So if
Right.
you kindly just go ahead and subscribe to the brother
Yeah.
and
Thank you, man.
let's get his account with a lot more people there because again, this Chris, I've been really pushing independent media, and I'm not
Right.
talking about independent media from people coming from the mainstream media after they've
Right.
been fired with a golden parachute and landing here at
Yeah.
Substack and getting 100,000 people right away. I'm talking
Yeah.
about people like
But I'm
you who
actually
on the
happy with
ground.
some of those folks who were let go from cable news
Hmm.
expert seats, and now they talk directly to the people who. The only reason why some people tuned into CNN and MSNBC were certain guests they couldn't wait to hear from, and now a
Yes,
lot of those people are
yes,
directly on this platform talking directly to. And I will even go so far as say I know some of those folks, and I know that they listen to the people who they couldn't do that through the cable television before.
that's my point,
They had
right?
no ability to have that direct engagement, and it's awesome.
The thing about it, the thing that I try to urge, however, though, I mean, first of all, I agree 100% with you. But what we don't want those who've worked in corporate media to bring to Substack is the same behavior. In other words,
Agreed. Agreed.
we don't want the same behavior. We want your behavior. We want that you can actually talk unadulterated.
I will say some of those people felt shackled in those positions.
Exactly.
Legal departments that would crack in and go, no, yeah, don't go there. And they don't feel that now. They're still very ethical. I know some of the folks behind the scene. I've been honored to have a few on. So I've had like Brian.
Who have you had on so far?
Well, we had Brian Karim. Let me go in order. So Sean Penner, who has been a soldier here for years and was a prisoner of war, was my first guest. And we do a regular branch from here because we both have the in-country experience. So that's the local. And then Brian Karim was my second guest, and I've known Brian for a while as a Facebook friend and a press colleague. Plus, I have his book with me as one of my guides when I came here, and I was really honored to have him on because I think he's, not only did he fight hard for his press badge, but he really was that rigorous voice we don't have in the White House press pool. We've had Craig Unger, who wrote about the way in which the Republican Party has frequently played games with international politics from Nixon era and Reagan era and Bush era, and really did well on the Trump-Russia case. We had John Fugelsang, who's from Sirius
I love
FM.
John. I haven't had John on yet. I need to get with him. Yes.
Yeah, he's great. And we were talking about how the right wing abuses scripture to do so, to whip around their audience. Frank Figluzzi comes on to talk about the corruption.
Oh, you had Frank?
Justice. Yeah, we had him on Saturday night as well. We've had him on 2 weeks ago in the first Friday, and then we had him again this Saturday. Great guest and great insight on that. He's a Boy Scout. And I'm going to say this. I remember at KPFT when we were so upset and very leery, and I think appropriately so, of the FBI.
Right.
And Frank represents that side that we want to have, the kind that.
But he's not there anymore. Yeah.
He's not there anymore, but he's not at MSNBC, and shackled by the way they do business. We had this last couple of weeks, we've had some Ukrainian journalists that were doing great work that can shed light on areas that even I didn't know as I got them on. I wasn't, sometimes when I bring someone on, I feel like I kind of know where we're going to go, and it's mainly for the audience. But I love when I walk away with some information I didn't know before. And then last night,
that's a call of a real journalist. If you can leave a conversation knowing more, and I make sure to always leave a conversation knowing more, because that other person always has the ability to teach you something.
That's right. And one that I really enjoyed last week was a guy from Instagram I watch, Liberal Trucker, who
I think I've seen.
He's on here. You should have him on. He's a fantastic guest. And I'm going to laugh at him real quick because I hope he's watching, or he can watch us on the restream. He says, we had 2 hours with Sean Penner and I talking really deep dive stuff about Ukraine and Robert Fico and Viktor Orban. And he says, you want me to follow that? you want me to follow that? And I said, I think we'll be fine. And we went for 3 hours in one of the most incredible conversations that I think is very important to our audience, because he understands common America, a working class America that we have to stay in touch with in order to get rid of this fascism.
I so agree with you. I want to ask you a few questions real quickly, because, like I said,
of course.
People,
Love it.
let's see. I have René Padin says, what do Ukrainians have to say to the American people at this time of crisis, both there and here? In a short answer.
Дякуємо. Дякуємо за підтримку. Thank you for your support. That's the number one thing every Ukrainian would say to every American. Дякуємо means, it's like дякую means I thank you. Дякуємо is plural. We thank you. За підтримки. Thank you for your support. And the reason is they know that America has been a really good partner, and they're very aware. They're often very aware of the percentage of support and where it comes from. And the second thing is that there's a lot of people who've come back and forth and built these bridges across the last 4 years, and some that are longer than 4 years, but especially over the last 4 years, there are people who've created invaluable bridges to the American community. And I never run into an American who has some big hostility, Ukrainian who has some big hostility towards Americans. It's it's really upsetting on Independence Day. Like we'll hit the 250th birthday of America. There's no cake on the table from my end. Sorry. For the people fighting for democracy, yes, but
Yeah.
right now I'm in limbo on it.
I hear you. I hear you.
But everyone comes and wishes me a wonderful Independence Day, and I'm like, please, man, like we don't remember the king.
We don't exact. Yeah, Catherine Hill says, "Thanks for that. You are a warrior for democracy, Chris. You are a warrior for
I
them."
still fight the fight of what's going on over there abroad. I'm actually providing people with intelligence and counterintelligence tools to deal with Oath Keepers, of the Three Percenters, Proud Boys, Patriot Front. I'm showing people a lot of tools that I used when I lived in Florida around the Proud Boys, even though I'm from Houston. I'm from East Side Houston, homie. I know Scarface is
You're
Bradley.
from the East Side, man.
I used to run a store over in Lockwood and I-10 and Mason Tidwell. I've worked in the best parts of town.
Hey,
So
he's from Houston, guys.
on the
He's
east
from
side, east
Houston.
side,
He's
east
from
side,
Houston. All right. Catherine
and
says,
that's really important.
she says it's just as though we're in the same room, meaning we've
That's right.
united America and Ukraine, like we're right here.
That's
Um,
right.
but are they all determined to fight off Putin to the end?
Let me back it up. The first thing is to understand that Ukrainians are fighting to have a home that they can
Right.
live in unfettered without outside, interference. If Putin stopped the war today, there's no desire to cross the border to do stuff
Hmm.
on the other side. But Ukrainians are not in the dark about what's wrong with the war. The war is not Vladimir Putin. The war is a combination of Vladimir, and it's not even Vladimir Putin and the Siloviki, his apparatchiks around. It's a Russian mindset of colonialism that's so deeply ingrained. It's a lot like white supremacy in America, where, by the way, we're having an air raid right now. So I have to warn, like I do here. Um, we have
Blackouts, right?
often
You
when
have
I
to
do
put.
yeah, but when I do my broadcast, I have to remind them. We'll do it like live, so you see the dot here. It's
Wow.
going to light up, and the reason why is because ballistic warning is in progress right at the moment as we're talking, and you're going to see. I'm going to hold this up while we talk. So this is the reason why they know that the problem is not simply Vladimir Putin. Watch as that dot in the middle. That's Kyiv right
Uh
there.
huh.
That's the Kyiv Oblast. But in a second, it's going to go wider because there's a ballistic warning coming from Bryansk. I'll put it down now as it comes open. Actually, I'll leave it off to the side. Um, but there's not a resistance in the street. That's basically, and now Odessa's going off. There's not a resistance in the street that's substantial, that says that this is not a Russian thing, this is Putin thing. No, no, no. It's very deeply ingrained in a big part of the society, and so long as people don't understand that, especially abroad, they think that there's some sort of magic. Here now it's beginning to fill in. We'll just see it real time. You
So
see
those
the
are the
map starts
places
turning red.
those are the places where
Right,
any missile could hit right now.
correct. That's within the range of missiles, and you'll start seeing all of it go red. Um,
Okay.
so So if it wasn't part of that colonial mindset, that colonial, essentially, I'm going to compare it to white supremacy in America because that's what it is. Um, then they would say, okay, they would agree with others that say, if Putin went away, it'd go away. But it's not that way. What I will say is that if Putin started something, he would really probably retroactively like to have not started.
Really? Or do you have to
Yeah, because
leave
it's
or?
a Oh, no, no, no. No, I don't go anywhere. I'm just showing you what the map
Okay,
looks like.
wow. The
See how
whole,
it's getting
almost the
more and more
entire
red? Yeah.
Ukraine now.
And it's amazing that Chernihiv, which is right here at the top, has not lit up. It will light up probably with my finger over it because
Yeah.
it's usually red before everything else. But you see currently, the
I
country
heard
is
you
lit up
had
with this.
400 missiles and drones came over a few days ago.
Yeah. In fact, I had just gotten off the air. Who was I talking to? Forgive me. I had just gotten off the air with one of our guests, John Fugelsang or someone, and within 20 minutes, I had Iskander missile strike, at the TETS 5 facility, which is my power facility, which is only barely a kilometer and a half away from me.
The power station for your area?
It's right across the river, so I'm not too far from the river on
Wow.
the east side, and it's
Right.
immediately on the river on the right side.
So they targeted that with several drones.
No, with missiles, with
Oh, with
high
missiles.
speed Iskander missiles, right?
Wow. And how are they? How far? I mean, how soon before that comes back online?
Uh, it's not coming online anytime soon. What they're doing now is large relay facilities or relay systems are put in place to bring in electricity from Europe, and to supply power systems from the remaining reactors that are
At
operational but if not damaged.
Cherbourg, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're thinking of Chernobyl, which is definitely offline, but like that. Okay, so we have four nuclear facilities that are operational, Rivne and other areas in the west, and they're damaged or affected, and they hit them immediately. In fact, that's what they hit a few days ago. They hit they hit four in the west, or they struck in that area. I can't tell you exactly precisely what the damage was per facility, but they're trying to knock out that power facility using those rockets. And air defense, is very important for not just the interception in the capital where I live, but you can only spread that so far across the country. You
Right.
have to do what you can to protect multiple places. And Ukraine is the size of Texas, almost exactly the size of
Yeah.
Texas. So imagine having a lot of your power, a lot of your concentration of air defense around Dallas, and then trying to simultaneously cover San Antonio, McAllen, El Paso,
Right.
etc. That's
Now,
that's really what it's like.
with all of that, right? You have your
Sure.
nuclear power centers, and you said you're importing a lot of electricity now from Europe, places,
Right,
power stations they can't hit.
which is
Yeah,
why Robert Fico just said, "We will turn it off if you don't turn on our Russian oil." And I'm gonna remind you every time I say that, Robert Fico has ties to financial ties, personally ties to Gazprom. So
there you go. Yeah,
follow
it's
the money, baby.
I think I'm going to bring on Charlotte. What's her name? In fact, she emailed me today. We're going to talk. She just wrote a new Substack, and
Hmm.
Charlotte Dennett. You should know who that is. She
No,
wrote
but
a
I'd really love to.
Yeah, she wrote a book on the oil pipelines in she called it the oil pipelines or something like that. And it says follow the oil, follow the money, etc.
Hmm.
For
Hmm.
from the Middle East right up. And she's
Yeah,
supposed to be on. She just wrote a piece called Deception and Dangerous Endgame on
that's
her
right.
Substack. So we are gonna
And
sort of
Europe
cover.
is so beholden to Russian oil that they
Yes.
literally are still importing Russian oil and gas despite what it does to kill Ukrainians. And think
Well,
about this, that if Ukrainians are not allowed to say, "Hey, look, we don't care how you get your oil, but you're not getting across our territory," because
hmm
I use the comparative of ISIS. I said, "Would you be okay if ISIS was the one controlling the oil?" And I'm going to use that example precisely because there are people who celebrate when someone like al-Baghdadi, a very terrible terrorist,
right,
is eliminated in whatever means necessary. But Putin, he gets a red carpet, tickets to the World Cup, and normalized, and that is a really big comparative, I think, that has to be examined. And you may remember that there was the Olympics scandal. I actually am now friends with Vladislav, who was the things that get to happen in my life. These blessings are very important. A very humble, beautiful young man who has his heart in all the right places. Priorities are really in the right place. And he said very clearly, that I asked him what he thought about the reaction on the world stage, and he said there are a lot of countries that will participate in the Olympics right now, but once the Olympics are going over, they're going to have to step back and go, well, what are we doing with this? Because Russia has often used, from the 1960s moving forward, used various ways of inroads in the sports facilities, in the entertainment field, in the scientific community, to bring in their point of view and their manipulation ultimately. And I am always concerned, especially since I come from folks who are, I'm going to say lean to the left. I don't like left and right, but it is what it is. Um, that's disingenuous because I know the value systems of people in America of why they lean to the left compared to the hard right. And Russia doesn't care about that part. That's what's
Exactly.
always so messed up. They don't care about the value systems of the evangelicals. They persecute evangelicals. So they appeal to the right to get, a reaction, then they appeal to the left to get a reaction. But
Hmm.
ultimately, what do they do when they land on the ground as Russians? So ask any African who went to Moscow to get a job. They wind up in a van, they wind up at Rostov on Don, then they wind up at the front, and they're called dispensables.
Right.
I have video of the soldiers, the Russian soldiers go, look at the dispensables doing this, singing our songs. They don't care about Africans. They don't care about the people that they co-opt into this. When they promote a liberation movement in Africa or South America, it's only to thwart the Western hemisphere.
Hmm.
It's not to literally have liberation. How do we know? Because in Africa right now, we have the process, what we call state capture, which is modern colonialism,
Hmm.
where in CAR and South Sudan and others, they give up 25, 30-year concessions on their own natural resources, which is the
Yes.
exact opposite of liberation. It's the exact opposite of autonomy and sovereignty, and
Luckily,
it's the Russian method.
in Central Africa, West Africa, we have a Traoré that's really fighting back against
Yeah,
France, and it turns out now that France apparently, this is not official. We don't have official on this,
sure.
but apparently there's a lot of hits out on these leaders. So we'll see what what happens because. As you know, what Mitterrand, I think it was Mitterrand or one of the French
Yeah,
former French
yeah,
prime ministers said, without Africa, France is nada. They don't have any
yeah.
resources or anything other than that which they get elsewhere for the most part.
And being an anti-colonialist myself, I relate to the anti-colonialist sentiment that is in Africa. I totally endorse it. My first activism was against apartheid. I was protesting in front of Shell Oil building
You and I
divestiture
both.
in
I mean, I was
1986.
on the University of Texas
Yeah,
campus with the beret and the signs, get out,
yeah. I'm
divest
still the
from,
only
you know.
guy. I'm the only guy in my neighborhood who can Kosi Sikelele, Africa, Malupagamitsu, Ponolwayo. So I'm still that guy, right? But what I
You're
will
better
say
than me,
is,
man.
so I was the lead singer of Zulu band in Houston, Kanyalanga.
Okay.
So the thing is that I had a Nigerian guy come on Twitter Spaces and get in a discussion with us. And first I treated him with respect because that's easy to do. And I go, but that shackle we just yanked off from one colonial power, yeah. What do you think what is going to happen when it's Russians? Wagner is no longer in control of those things. The SVR, the Russian intelligence system, now controls all of the Wagner apparatus that was put in under Prigozhin and Utkin.
Hmm.
So that shackle does not go away.
Yeah, again, I have somebody. Cat says, Egberto, is that where I know you from? Because I just mentioned being at University of Texas fighting for the divestiture of the university from South
That's
Africa.
right.
But anyway, we're coming up close to time, and but I've been wanting to chat with you on Substack Live for quite some time now, and I'm glad we
Likewise.
did it, and we have to do it more often as far as concerned. So give me a closer, give me something that we need to tell Americans about what you're seeing in the Ukraine and what you think we should be doing here in America relative to that.
Honestly, I'm gonna go with what liberal trucker said last night. He says, when you have a house down the street that's burning and you go, oh my God, I want to put that out, but then your garage is on fire, you got to put your garage out first.
Right.
That's how things are. And I think that by holding Trump accountable at the domestic level, that's really what's going to happen internationally as well. The midterms have to be decisive. You have to be at a level that is so different than what we had before when it comes to get out the vote, and you have to put essentially the power of the people back in place. Now, when the power of the people is exacted, and you get the midterms back, it's not done. You also have to start putting let's look at John Cornyn. I'm from Texas.
Hmm.
John Cornyn just spouted Nick Fuentes jargon, was saying the left wants to take things over,
Yes.
and they're against
Yes.
the America first. And I went, "Did you just say America first?" No. What's he doing? He's pivoting to that to earn up, the Trump vote and the Trump bootlicking side. And he's a former judge. He knows better. He is
Hmm.
corrupt. He's always been. I've never been a fan of him, but I always at least said between him and Ted Cruz and how it goes to Stockdale and these other guys, or Stockton or wherever they got it ran
Right.
against him a few years ago. is that we don't want to go worse, at least. So we always thought Cornyn was on this, but when he's saying America first on his timeline, and going out there like full throated, there's a problem. So there has to be a pivot back. And I think you already know how some of the Texas politics has been shaping up. There's some movement, and you got to get out there. And I will say I like this guy Graham Plattner for one reason.
Oh,
That's
from
something he
New
said
Hampshire, right?
from Maine.
Maine.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
right, Maine.
And one of the things he said recently, I think it was so important, was that he says, if your neighbor was okay, we have an all clear on the ballistic, by the way. So that's good. But he said, forgive me, I have it pop up on
So
my screen.
you guys are no longer under threat for now.
Yeah, yeah. Right now the ballistics have been taken care of. So Greg Plattner says, I know we have a lot of contempt for neighbors who voted that way, and our fellow citizens who voted that way, and I get it. But if they got robbed at gunpoint, if they had their life savings stolen, either way it's stolen. And if you don't have sympathy for that, you got to look in the mirror about what you're standing for. And I like that message in the sense of I'm really not I'm very much in the no quarter for Jan Sixers, to be honest with you. But you got to give an an off ramp to people who've made bad decisions. And I'll also mirror what Liberal Trucker said last night on my program when he said, if you're just now changing your view over Trump, you've been a racist the entire time. If you're suddenly changed today, you've been a sexist the entire time. You've been a rape apologist the entire time. I got that. But there's part of America that still votes basically at the pocketbook level only, and they still believe these ideas about wealth, and they're getting ripped off. And common Americans who are caught up in their religious dogma and their religious cult-like behavior, they're paying at the pocketbook level in a way that they didn't expect. And you got to give them an off ramp. And I'm not saying go play kumbaya. I'm not much into the kumbaya moment right now, to be honest with you. But you got to think strategically, like he said, and I like how he said it. He says, if you're a compassionate, proper person, having your neighbor ripped off is not a good thing.
I love that. In other words, engage your fellow man. I mean, you don't have to think about anything else. Just be a human being. And if
Yeah,
you care about a human being, you don't care about their past. Let's care about what they're going to do presently
yeah,
and in the future. Folks, we've been speaking to Chris Sampson. Chris Sampson is a photographer, journalist, videographer, musician. He's based in Ukraine right now. He's former correspondent, former producer, former writer at KPFT, the
yeah.
community station where I actually do politics done right. It,
And you are
it,
on fire, homie. Yeah, let me say this, okay? Because I gotta pay credit. When I was determining what to do, with like publishing on YouTube, going on X, trying to get the news out of what we were doing, spending endless hours on Spaces trying to talk about it with people, I had to look at other models that work. And you took the initiative to conquer this platform, to turn that camera on, to be regimented. You pop up in my email like clockwork, and you are fixated on getting the news out there. And I see the headlines of what you're going to cover. You're covering the process that's happening in America. And so when someone says, "Who's my inspiration?" I got a small list of people, and you're on that list of people who set that model. And when I'm wondering if am I doing it the right way, I don't know, but I'm going to try. I recently turned down a copy editor position after, and I think this is important to share with my friends. I went to a lot of Ukrainians who had watched what I did for the last 4 years, and I got the biggest boost of support, like especially from a woman who's very special to me, whose husband was in captivity and came home last August, and she goes, "This is your reward for standing by us," and they gave me permission to turn down the job.
let me tell you, thank you, Chris. Let me tell you, you've always been an inspiration. Let me just tell you that, always been an inspiration. And thank you so kindly for spending this time with me, even as missiles are going across your head
Never miss it.
in the Ukraine. I
And
appreciate that.
these viewers that are with us, every one of you, thank you. Thank you
Yes,
for doing this. And I'm going to say this real quick. This is our co-creation. This whole way we do things is our co-creation. You being here with us and you taking the time to tune in with your busy schedules and your priorities, this is our co-creation. I don't get on this platform so I could do things. I've avoided being on camera for 4 years to keep focusing on people in front of me. But I know the frustration of what are we going to do? Who's going to speak for us? What's wrong with CNN and Tweedledee and Tweedledum? And this is what we have to do here. And you being here is as important as Egberto being here and myself being here. So I
Thank you
thank you
so
from the
kindly
bottom
for
of my
that,
heart.
Chris. Folks, please remember, please go ahead and subscribe to my brother here, Chris Sampson. He's in the Ukraine. He's doing damn good work out there. Please subscribe
Thank
to
you.
all our channels and all us in independent media. We do, in fact, need your support. Thank you so kindly, Chris. And to all our listeners or watchers, love you all. We are presently out.